This changes everything for the Toronto Maple Leafs as multiple new reports have dropped, including a report from Elliot Freeman revealing some huge details as it pertains to Mitch Marner's future in Toronto. We're going to break down those reports, discuss what it means going forward. We also have a couple updates surrounding John Tavares and one wild report surrounding Matthew Knies that has fans fired up. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to help us towards our big goal of 20,000 subscribers. And if you're a part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. Obviously, the Leafs are coming off of some big wins, 3 in a row now. They play tomorrow. We're going to take a step back today and talk about the future of this team, and specifically as it pertains to some new reports that have dropped surrounding both Mitch Marner and a very positive report surrounding Matthew Knies. And we'll start there. This came out very recently. Matthew Knies has made it clear that he loves being a Toronto Maple Leaf and isn't considering leaving Toronto. He politely declined to discuss the status of his extension, but there's no doubt that Treliving is determined to keep him, having turned down trade interest from rival GMs at the trade deadline. It's a good time to talk about this because obviously the Leafs now, Matthew Knies is coming off of a very good game with yesterday. But beyond that, he's had a fantastic season. He obviously is going to need to get extended here soon. And it seems that he is fully bought in, Matthew Knies it is, on staying with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is a bit of a different turn than what we might be talking about in a few minutes about, we'll be talking about in a few minutes about Mitch Marner.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, this is a guy who has said that he wants to stay here. I think all Leafs fans want him to stay here, right? He's like the new age power forward. He's been fantastic this season, and he's only continuing to get better. He's only going to get better. I mean, he's been fantastic. So we don't know exactly what his contract's going to look like. I'm glad that they're keeping it quiet, right? Just kind of like Austin Matthews' camp did, like William Nylander's camp did as well. So they're keeping it quiet, and we don't know what it's going to look like. It could be a bridge deal. I'm honestly thinking it could end up being a bridge deal where the salary is quite a bit, but obviously, because he wants to get paid in a couple years because the salary cap's going up. But if they can somehow lock him in for maybe 7 or 8 years at, maybe a higher cap hit than maybe people would like, I think it could work out really nicely for them because this guy's going to be a 30 goal scorer in the league. He's a power forward. We know he shows up in the playoffs. And, when you move forward after this year, the salary cap's going up significantly every single summer. So I would be okay with giving him maybe a little bit more money right now. But if you sign him long term, it's going to age fantastic, especially because he's so young. We tend to forget, right? He's still so young in this league. So I think that, they are going to come to a contract agreement, an extension, but I just wonder what it looks like at this point. Is it a bridge? Do they end up signing him long term? If Brad Treliving can get him long term, it's going to age beautifully, but we'll see because these players and their agents, they're smart. They know that, they can sign a bridge deal and get more money in the future.
Yeah, and obviously he's having a breakout year, something that we kind of expected if you saw him play last year, especially in the playoffs. And of course, being an RFA, the Leafs will have a chance to match any offer that other teams give him. And I don't think there's a world that he leaves Toronto, but it's good to see a report come out that he is actually wanting to stay in Toronto after, of course, having a great season like that. But let's pivot now. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. But let's pivot to something that's been taking over the headlines a little bit as of late, and that is, of course, Mitch Marner, not Christina, Mitch Marner. Elliot Freeman came out and said the recent discussions about Mitch Marner weren't something that popped up on Friday. And let's just give us a backstory back to the trade deadline. It had been asked about, and people were surprised that it took long for something like that to happen. That's why I got the impression, as a matter of fact, I had people who told me that they were surprised it took so long to come out. We know now that Toronto and Carolina were working and trying to get a deal done. I don't think the partner thing was there. This wasn't a last minute development. This was something that happened earlier in the week. I don't know exactly when, but it wasn't a last minute thing. And this kind of changes the outlook of it. It seems that Brad Treliving was actively shopping Mitch Marner at the deadline for Mikko Rantanen in specific. Now, obviously, he wasn't trying to trade Mitch Marner to any team, but they wanted Mikko Rantanen. It came out after that Mikko Rantanen wanted to join Toronto and would have extended in Toronto like he did in Dallas at a similar number. So this wasn't something that just happened and Brad Treliving was forced. His hand was forced. He was planning on this for what seems like weeks, or at least a week, and that kind of changes the outlook of his future in Toronto. We have another report here we'll dive into in a minute, but this new piece of information, even though it dates back to the deadline, matters a lot now as you start to look at what it means for the Leafs going forward with Mitch Marner and the cap hit that he's going to have.
Yeah, and feelings get hurt along the way too. We saw where Brad Marchand, everything that happened with him leaving Boston and how he wanted to re-sign and they weren't even close on a contract extension, right? So we've seen things like this happen. I'm not so sure Marchand's going to return to Boston now because of all of this that's happened, right? So it is a big factor in all of this. And one thing that I saw online a lot in the comments, on X, all of this, that people were saying that this scenario did not happen. This is just rumors. This happened. This definitely did happen heading into the trade deadline, that they did want Mitch Marner, the Carolina Hurricanes, that is, and that they were going to trade the Toronto Maple Leafs Mikko Rantanen. And it was reported that Rantanen would have only signed with 4 teams, Carolina not being one of them. That he told them that as soon as he got there, and the Leafs were on that list. All of that absolutely happened. It actually happened. So, I do believe that this does, throw things kind of into the air now heading into this offseason with Mitch Marner, because now he knows that the team tried to trade him, right? Feelings kind of get in the way of things like that sometimes. And on top of it, I feel like this kind of shows the team's hand a little bit as well, that they were, feeling like maybe they know he's leaving this offseason. They were like, hey, if we can go out and get Mikko Rantanen in return for him, obviously that would be fantastic, especially if Rantanen were to sign. So that definitely did happen. Again, this summer's going to get very interesting. We don't know where Mitch Marner's head's at in terms of the dollar amount. We're going to find out after the playoffs end, of course, and how those negotiations go. But it's going to be very interesting, and it all depends on how the Leafs again perform in the playoffs.
Yeah, and this was talking about a trade, which would have been the craziest trade. I mean, probably crazier than the initial Mikko Rantanen one out of Colorado. But regardless of that, the Leafs are now at a spot where you mentioned it in the playoffs. The problem now becomes he can be available to all these teams in free agency in a couple of months' time here, and that's where some new reports have started to come out. And again, this came out. The actual trade reports were going on for a while, but in this drop from Pierre LeBrun, the Carolina Hurricanes, are expected to pursue Mitch Marner if he ends up hitting free agency this summer. I mean, which he will. Carolina will have ample cap flexibility, in part because Stankoven is still on his entry-level contract. The Hurricanes project to have $36 million to work with, and that cap space could allow Carolina to go big game hunting this summer, with Marner headlining that and John Tavares as well here. So it makes things a little bit interesting, especially because now maybe that was part of the reason they wanted to go with a package for a guy like Matthew Knies or Stankoven, but specifically Stankoven because he's still under his entry-level contract through next season, which gives them a lot of cap flexibility to go out and get a guy like Mitch Marner or even John Tavares. This complicates things even further now because he's a free agent. He will be a free agent, Mitch Marner, that is, at the end of the season. Same with John Tavares. And it seems like the Carolina Hurricanes they'll probably be a little bit desperate, but they showed interest in the past. They were probably willing to, or getting close to willing to doing the deal if, things would have went the other way here. So this one's a little bit interesting to me, very interesting, and a little bit scary, I guess, depending on how they actually perform in the playoff run. But again, if they don't have any success, they get eliminated in the first or second round here. I think the Leafs will probably just let him walk.
Yeah, if it's a first round elimination again in the same fashion, we know what the result's going to be. The change needs to come either way. We'll get to John Tavares in a second too, but I do think he resigns in Toronto. I think ultimately that's what happens. It's just going to be a conversation that happens after the season ends as well. But I think that he's going to end up returning. But in terms of Mitch Marner, to go back, to the initial report too, I thought it was interesting that people behind the scenes were surprised that it took this long for trade discussions to come up. Right, I thought that was very interesting too. And then when you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, they asked for Mitch Marner in return for Mikko Rantanen. They said we can make this work if Mitch Marner were to waive and to come over. We're interested in Mitch Marner. And then when you look at their cap situation this year, they have a lot of expiring contracts. Like they have a lot of cap space. They're projected to have, again, it's a projection, so things are going to happen in the offseason, especially July 1st. And maybe they re-sign some players before then. You never know exactly what happens. But in terms of their projected cap space heading into free agency to pursue Mitch Marner, they have $36 million that they can use. So they can definitely just throw whatever at him and be like, okay, we got our guy if he ends up signing, and then fill out the rest of the team that way, because they're in desperate need of a superstar. That's been one thing I think with that team that they've never really had in this era, and they've been a good team, but nobody to really push them over the edge or anything like that. And I don't know if Mitch Marner is going to be that guy, especially in the playoffs, based on everything we've seen in Toronto, but I feel like in terms of the mentality and where their team is at, I could see them wanting to pursue that player and be like, what do you want? We'll write you a blank check, essentially, just to have a player like you on the team. So it's going to get interesting. A lot of teams are going to be interested, but it just depends, again, how much you want to be a Toronto Maple Leaf and how he performs in the playoffs.
And a lot of it will depend on the playoffs in a month. Regarding John Tavares, spoke out in the Mitch Marner situation, said, I think there's a lot of noise. When there's a lot of noise around, you just go out there, put your gear on, and play. So I think Mitch Marner ultimately, John Tavares, will hopefully end up extending in Toronto. You have some people on the side of Mitch Marner saying he's the heart and soul of this team. That's, of course, former Leafs forward Nazem Kadri. So a bunch of interesting things. The sentiment is going to be very intriguing surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs. So what matters most is the playoffs, which start in less than a month. And we'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. So make sure to hit the subscribe button and let us know down below what your thoughts are.